Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's the day after the election, and we are all tired and worn out from covering the election, but we love to talk about the election and love to talk about politics. So our tradition here is to have Mike Dunn come in the day after the election, and we kind of digest what happened and talk about what's going to happen next. Welcome, Mike.
Oh, thank you. It's quite a tradition, isn't it?
Yes.
You're the person who was up until 4 o'clock in the morning. I salute you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
We're sitting here in the Pac 14 studio. Tom Taylor's back there pushing the buttons. All the candidate interviews that you all did, that's exemplary.
We wore him out.
You ought to be tired.
We wore him out
Yeah.
in the cause of democracy, so
Yeah.
people could look at these things if they wanted to take the time to do the research. If they didn't just want to vote their party and they wanted to know who they were voting for.
It looks like a lot of that happened.
Yeah, but we gave them a little taste of the personality so they could sort of know who these people were.
Yeah, you did a great job. Great coverage.
So what was your shock moment last night when you went, oh my gosh?
I think my shock moment would have come with the vote totals received by John Hamilton in the Wicomico County executive race.
Let me just show you the headline of today's Salisbury Independent. You can see that Bob Culver won easily, and then Mary Beth Carosa beat Jim Mathias, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So I think that was my moment.
Right.
Politics and elections, they're about math. And there's a lot of things that they're about. But at the end of the day, they're also about math. And I dare say that anybody calculating the math in the last week or month would have come up with the equation that Mr. Hamilton gets, 9,000, 10,000 votes as the Democratic nominee.
Now, I'm guilty and I'm innocent on two things with John Hamilton. One was I think I gave him more coverage than anyone else.
He was the Democratic nominee for county executive.
We interviewed him here, but
Yeah.
I did not take him seriously as a candidate because when he would say things like, well, when I'm county executive, we're going to take care of this flooding. I was like, you're never going to be county executive. Come on, we know this. So why are you, it's great that you're putting up some ideas and these guys are responding to you, but it's great that an American can run and seek an office in America, that's great. But really, you're just in the way, was my attitude about this. And he goes out and he gets 6,000 votes.
I think he got more than that.
Was it more than that?
Yeah, it was. I know it's been a long day for you. I think he got upwards of 9,000 to 10,000 votes.
Is that what he got?
So, it's. I think what we saw yesterday. One of the things that again in our little preview, what we're talking about today is that.
You're right. He got 9,000. Bob Culver got 15.
Yeah.
He got 9, and Jack got.
Yeah, got
Okay.
6 or so.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I happen to think it's not a good thing, went in there, and if they were an R, they went and found every single R. And if they were a D, they went and found every single D. And no disrespect to Mr. Hamilton's candidacy, but again, to your point, I think a lot of people didn't take him seriously as a candidate based on some interviews, etc. And yet he outpolled and outnumbered the person in the race who, other than the incumbent Bob Culver, Jack Heath, was considered a legitimate candidate. He's the president of the Salisbury City Council, seen as someone, and yet he
has stature.
He has stature, and yet he's also an unaffiliated voter, like I am, and an independent. And I think that yesterday showed that, I think across the board, pick a city, pick a county, pick a state, being an independent is still, it's a nice thing as a voter, but I think as a candidate, it certainly presents some problems out there. And I think yesterday here in Wicomico County, you sort of saw a little bit of that.
Looking at it like on its face, Hamilton made the point that he was a young guy and that the county needs young leadership. That was sort of the central point of his. If that message got out, could that have been what it was?
Well, of course that could. I mean, this is not a science sitting here in this studio with you the day after. These are opinions.
Right.
And of course it got the biggest laugh at the forum that the Greater Salisbury Committee and the Chamber and PACE put on.
Which, by the way, thank you for that. It was awesome.
It was our pleasure. And so you look and you go, well, his line when he said, what I can offer is that I'm the youngest candidate, and that's clear.
Right.
And everybody in the audience laughed,
Right.
as did Bob Culver, as did Jack Heath, because it was true. So sure, there's a possibility that the voters of Wicomico County were looking for a younger county executive. It's always a possibility.
I just wonder if it mirrors what's going on in Salisbury. It's definitely a young city.
Yeah.
They're thinking in young ways. When I get around the crew that's running the city, I feel like an elderly person.
I would agree, except I don't think Mr. Hamilton had the support of any of those
Good point.
folks who are, if you will, churning and burning within the community.
Right.
So, but it is what it is, and you got to give some credit where credit is due. And Bob Culver was reelected. He was reelected with more votes, a significant amount of more votes this year than he got 4 years ago.
Right, and I haven't gotten the turnout numbers yet, so I don't know if it's related to turnout.
Sure.
But 15,000 has always been that magical number in the county.
And I had conversation yesterday with some people, if you will, that were crunching numbers
Right.
and doing math, and they are in the know. This happened to be just a casual lunch, and I dropped by, and there they were, and they were predicting that the county executive would top out at about 13,000 votes, and yet, again, to Bob Culver's credit, second term, we are a conservative area. Bob is an avowed conservative, so it's quite easy to sit here and make the case that he won because he reflected what people in Wicomico County want to see, and simple as that.
Yeah, now I've argued all along and been criticized a lot, like I'm defending him, but I'm not. But he hasn't really gotten himself in any big trouble.
Well, and he's put forward, look, it's easy to make a case for Bob's reelection. He tackled some things. I look at, you can look at one singular issue. He brought alcohol to the Wicomico County Civic Center. I'm not here to promote and suggest that alcohol is
Sure.
the, cure to everything, but it put us in a more competitive situation relative to concerts
In
and
terms
venues.
of a business model.
Business
It's
model.
what you have to do.
And giving him credit for decades upon decades.
inertia.
There was not a county council person or a county executive or a rec commission person who was willing to take that on. And so he took that on. And so, he did things. Look at the Henry Parker Athletic Complex. He reinvested. He reluctantly reinvested in some schools, but he invested in some schools and is about to do another thing. So, he increased our savings account, if you will. So, it's quite easy if you're a conservative in Wicomico County to sit there and check all the boxes and go, he's earned my vote. And we can sit here and talk about ifs and whats and maybes, but that's clearly one of the conclusions that you have to reach. We're a conservative county. We have a conservative county executive, and he just won re-election.
Someone told me they were from Harford County, and they were telling me that this is about a decade ago. Everybody went to bed at one night, and it was a rural county. And the next morning they woke up, and they were a suburban Baltimore city, Baltimore County. And the whole mission had changed. The conservatives were out, the Youngbloods were in, and they told me that this is happening in Wicomico right now. We're not even aware of it. So I was kind of looking for that this time. I didn't see it.
What I think, again, drawing my own conclusions in the last 12 hours or so, what I think is happening and is very real is that we have a strong urban suburban core. It runs right up and down the Route 13 corridor. It runs from Fruitland through Salisbury into Delmar. 94% of the county's economic activity takes place in that corridor every day. More than 120,000 people come into that corridor every single day. But we also have a very rural environment in Hebron and Sharptown and Pittsville and Mardella and et cetera. So what I think is that the two can exist as two things. We can be both. I don't think that Wicomico County can any longer be declared just a rural county, nor can it any longer be declared this urban enclave. We're both. And Bob Culver represents, and the conservative movement pretty much traditionally represents what you might call the outer ring of the smaller municipalities. The Jake Days and the young people that you were speaking of earlier, I think they represent that urban core. I think they can both grow and both coexist. And if you look at it that way, I think there's opportunity for us all as a community to continue to thrive.
Right. Bob scared me when he was running the first time. He said, what we need to do is just build a county government building out next to Shorebird Stadium and put the sheriff's offices there and have lots of parking, because no one wants to have to come down and fight to park in downtown Salisbury. It's crazy. And I was like, you don't understand the purpose of downtown Salisbury or the future of downtown Salisbury. I was like, how can you be so off on this? And he never said it again. He didn't make it a big campaign thing, but it was in the back of his mind. So I just felt like you don't love the city like you need to. You need to be trying to do more to promote the city. And I thought he was getting it. And when I have him on here soon, I'm going to ask this question.
Yeah.
But where do you see him in terms of Salisbury? Does he love Salisbury like maybe he needs to love Salisbury?
Well, I don't think he needs to, with all
Right.
due respect.
Right.
We have a mayor of the city of Salisbury in Jake Day who clearly loves the city of Salisbury. And whatever growth happens in the city of Salisbury or Fruitland or Del Mar, by default also happens in Wicomico County. So Bob has rural roots. That's who he's true to. And it's quite evident that he and the mayor of Salisbury, he and Jake Day have some issues and don't see eye to eye. But maybe they don't have to see eye. Maybe they don't have to see eye to eye. Maybe we're overthinking it.
Right.
And maybe the city of Salisbury can do its own thing, national folk festivals and downtown redevelopment and, biking trails and hiking trails and all of that. And maybe Wicomico County can continue to do its things, building and expanding the Civic Center and a Henry Parker complex and the West Side Project, the development escapes me, the campground project. Yes.
Yeah.
So, I think the two can coexist, and maybe that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to write about this because, this has been an issue my entire existence.
Mine too.
The city versus county, but on different levels, in different ways has been an issue.
Yeah.
When the county wants to move the library out of the city,
Sure.
Why? Stuff like that. So I'm kind of concerned about it. The biggest problem they have, they're roommates there at the the government office building, and that's an awkward situation. That's going to change. And I think a lot of their conflicts right now, there's a lawsuit about who pays for the chiller and who pays for other stuff. The city pays some kind of rent there, like $1 a year.
Yeah.
But it's clear the city needs to get out of that building.
I think it's clear that the two need to separate as entities operating under one building.
Right.
Who leaves, I guess that's something that the city and the county will determine, but that was an idea. Mid-1970s, the Greater Salisbury Committee, where I'm currently the president and CEO, it was not consolidation of services so much as it was, hey, let's put everything under one building and make it easier and accessible.
Oh, that part, I say yes.
Yeah, if you will. And it was an idea that probably had merit at the time and perhaps doesn't have merit any longer. And that's something that I think, Bob Culver and Jake Day are certainly going to sit down and think about.
So Mr. Culver, in his comments, why did you win? He actually characterized it as a city versus county thing. That the county, he says, is being run better than the city, more or less, is what he said. And people like the way his conservative style of financial leadership. Whereas the city, they try all kinds of things. So far, they're very successful in what they try, but the county is just not as experimental.
And again, I might say that Bob Culver's governing philosophy and what he interprets this morning can absolutely be his version of things. Jake Day, if he were to hear that, and I'm sure he's reacting to it, would see it differently. And again, maybe that's the lesson of this election, is that the county executive can have a view of the county that doesn't necessarily concentrate on the city of Salisbury. And the mayor of Salisbury can have a view of what he's doing that doesn't necessarily take into account the rest of the county, which is understandable. So these are the thoughts that I've had. I'm not speaking for Bob Culver. Yeah. I'm not speaking for Jake Day, but I think that, I don't see this as a referendum on city versus county. I've been here since I was 4 years old, and the city of Salisbury and the Sharptowns and Mardellas and Pittsvilles and Parsonsburg, there's always been tension there and struggle because they are different ways to live in the same county and in the same community. So this is just a continuation of that, I think.
County Council kind of went the way we thought it would.
Yeah.
John Cannon was the top voter getter among the at-large. Bill McCain returns to the council as a Democrat, second highest total. Mark Hilmer won. Ernie Davis won. He didn't have an opponent. District 3 was won by Larry Dodd, the incumbent. District 4, where you live, a newcomer, Josh Hastings, and he didn't just win, he won big.
Yeah, there were two really good candidates in my neighborhood, in my district, if you will. And traditionally, that district has leaned a little bit more toward the center, the Democratic center, if you will. Perhaps its proximity to Salisbury University has something to do with that. As I look at those county council results, what stands out clear as it can be is there was a 6-1 Republican majority. That's now a 4-3 Republican majority. And the two newcomers in Bill McCain and Josh Hastings put as loudly and strongly as they could out into the public that education was their number one issue. So as a proponent of education, you know, the Greater Salisbury Committee and the Chamber of Commerce and the Community Foundation and the newly formed Wycomico County Education Foundation, it was a good night for education. The county council went and increased maintenance of effort last year. So, you know, it will be interesting to see, but I'd like to think that we're on a trajectory now that at the very least, Bill McCain and Josh Hastings will keep things like education front and center and cause a little bit of good conversation. Mark Kilmer had a text conversation with him this morning. He said that his opponent, Alex Scott, also a newcomer, you know, they're going to have lunch on a regular basis because Alex brought some ways of thinking that Mark hadn't thought of. So, you know, you look at Josh and Susanna Kane, both really good candidates. Mark and Alex, good candidates. So I like to look at the positive side of things, and maybe this election shows that, you know, we can meet somewhere in the middle where things get done a little bit.
And you won't take credit, but the Greater Salisbury Committee put forth a Young Leaders program, and Josh was one of those.
He was. Our Transformational Community Leadership Series, which you were our host and which we'll be doing again in 2019, he was one of the members of that cohort. And that's one of the things that we were encouraging is that elections in the future won't be settled with people our age. It's that next generation, and good for Josh. And again, you look at Susanna Kane, and I texted her this morning, you know, I know things didn't go your way, but boy, you brought a great voice to the dialogue or to the, you know, the communication in the election cycle, and I hope you don't go away because, you know, she did a good job.
One thing she said in here, which I had not thought of, she said, the council needs a woman.
Needs a woman. So, I mean, we're still gender, we're not gender neutral, we're an all-male council, county executive who's a man, and so, you know, Susanna is a good, fresh voice, and hopefully she will continue being that.
Now, we were all amped up about the elected school board. We didn't know how that would go, and some interesting races there. Don Fitzgerald, the president of the school board, was reelected, as was the vice president was automatically reelected. He wasn't,
Gene Malone.
Gene Malone wasn't opposed. Michael Murray got back in at large. But a surprise, Ann Sukowski has come back from nowhere. She was always active in Republican politics, and now she's won a seat on the school board, a former teacher.
And, you know, Ann has, I don't know how many times she's run for office, but it's a lot. And so she has finally won a seat as an elected official outside of her Republican State Central Committee, of course. So, former teacher, this will be an interesting dynamic. It's not a young dynamic. That's one of the things that's interesting. It's going to
be an old school board, yeah.
It's none of the school board members have kids in the schools. I suppose some of them have grandkids or great-grandkids in the schools. So I think that's interesting. We weren't sure how all of that was going to shake out, but it shook out that not a lot of young folks were interested in serving time on the school board. So we have a pretty seasoned group of people, and we'll see how they mesh together, see what they think about Dr. Hanlon's vision of things, and see how we perform as an elected school board. Time will tell.
House of Delegates all went about the way that we thought.
I would agree with that.
I would say that Dan O'Hare ran an interesting campaign, raised some questions, got people thinking about some stuff, but finished far in third place, as he would, in a district that's really dominated by Republicans no matter what.
I mean, the progressive, you look at Michelle Gregory at the county council level, you look at Ben Jealous at the state level, you look at Dan O'Hare, all avowed progressives. You look at Jamad Gould.
Yes, Jamad was very impressive when he was here.
He was, but I think that progressive label was, I think you can say, clearly to the left of where the state of Maryland and Wycomico County and the Eastern Shore wants to be, at least based on one night's results.
Addie Eckert beat back a similar kind of challenge in the numbers that she always gets, which leads us to the big kahuna, the one that everyone talked about, that hundreds of thousands of dollars was spent, District 38, the state senate.
Yeah, and Mary Beth Carrozza took the plunge with the encouragement and support of Governor Hogan as part of his plan to try and flip the Senate. And that didn't work as a macro plan, but it certainly worked out for Delegate Carrozza. A decisive victory. Good for her. We look forward to working with her again. I said both to Delegate Carrozza and Senator Mathias earlier in 2018, from where I sit and doing my job, I was bummed that one of them wasn't going to have a job, come next General Assembly session. Mary Beth worked very hard. Jim had won a couple of very close elections against some sort of outliers as Republicans. And now he ran into a good candidate. Yeah. And I think Jim was probably aware that this was a tough time for him, and the results bore that out.
Yeah, his first race with Michael James. Michael was a great candidate, but he never worked like Mary Beth.
Yeah, and he was Ocean City-centric, if you will. Mike McDermott, a little bit extreme perhaps in election number 2, and Jim barely won both of them. So now suddenly he had a pretty mainstream, legitimate, credentialed conservative, well-organized, knows how to run a campaign, and did it the right way. And so I'm not saying that this is the end for Jim Mathias. I certainly wouldn't say that. I would certainly say that he has served with distinction. One of the thoughts that came to me this morning, we don't want to look at the history and the record of Norm Conway based on the fact that he lost his last election. You look at the body of work. And I think the same holds true for Jim Mathias. You don't look that he lost this election. You look at public service as the mayor of Ocean City and then a member of the House and as the member of the Senate. And it's clear and demonstrable that he did good things for the Lower Shore, and now hopefully Mary Beth Carrozza will do the same sorts of good things.
And I love his stories when he first went into the House and he was trained by Norm Conway. Yeah. He's going to go up for election. There was a vote he didn't want to vote on, that the Democratic position was won, and he had a different position. And he tried to not vote, and Norm was like, "That's not what we're here for."
It doesn't work that way.
I mean, just beautiful stories about and how he's learned and he grew through the process.
Yeah. Jim's been, Jim, he's like the Energizer Bunny, man. He comes in on 2 wheels flying and letting things loose, and he's had a good run, and we will see what happens in the future. But I expect that Mary Beth Carrozza, with the support of the governor, that's a good thing for the Eastern Shore, for the Lower Shore. The governor is an advocate and a fan of mayor days. Mary Beth Carrozza brings some heft now, and so let's see where that takes us in the next 4 years. It could be exciting.
I've known both of them since I was a kid. I grew up with Mary Beth, and I remember when she was running for delegate, she called me and she said, "Can we have lunch? Because I need someone to explain Salisbury to me." She goes, "I cannot figure out Salisbury." And it's true. It's a very complicated, compared to Ocean City, it's a very complicated political dynamics here, and who's who and what they do and how things are motivated. But she wanted to learn that, and learned it, and it made her very effective.
One of the best conversations I had with her was we spent 45 minutes on the phone. I was in my car. It was a winter night, and it was about offshore wind.
Right.
And she, exactly to your point, now, tell me where this is coming from. She ultimately has sort of seen things a little bit differently.
Yeah, constituent-wise, it makes no sense for her to support that.
No, that's
but she's
right.
going to learn everything about it.
She absolutely did. So that's one of the great things about Mary Beth. And as the state senator, I'm assuming that she'll do her job as a state senator. She is dogged. She will get in and she will learn, and she works very hard. And so I think that's a very positive thing. And she'll figure out Salisbury and Princess Anne and Somerset County and Pocomoke, because that's now part of her district. And she won all 3 counties.
She even won Somerset County by 10 votes.
She even won Somerset County. Yeah.
Unbelievable. What do you see happening next? Where are we going?
Well, I think the way I've looked, at least here in Wicomico County, is that I think 4 years from now is really going to be a bigger election than this one was. We've established the fact that there's a pretty significantly elderly Board of Education. I can see some younger
I'm sure Gene Malone would have a problem with that.
Gene Malone, who's Y-High guy
our
with you
age.
and me. Exactly, by and large.
But yeah, that's old. I'm
talking
sorry,
on
it's old.
average.
Yeah.
So I think you might see some first-time interest coming from that. And I also see, you might see some of that in Wicomico County. So I think you've got some of those young people, the Josh Hastings of the world, are going to be trying to figure out if it's time for them to put their hat in the ring. So I see it'll be interesting to watch the county executive and the county council and see how that dynamic changes, or if it changes. It'll be interesting to see how Jake Day and Bob Culver work things out or don't moving forward. It'll be interesting to watch the Board of Education get their, seats warm and figure that out. But I think as interesting as anything will be watching this next generation of people give some consideration between now and 4 years from now as to perhaps a generational sea change locally. We'll see.
You raised some questions about the revenue cap that might constrict us. Do you think that's off the table now, or we can still talk about it?
Oh, our plan all along was to wait until the election was over. We've made the presentation. I think the revenue cap discussion at Greater Salisbury Committee was clearly misrepresented in the campaign. We're not advocating for it to go away. We're advocating that we did a study on it, and here are 6 things that stand out that we think should be addressed. We've gotten some buy-in from a few of them from the county executive, from the county council, but we knew that having that discussion during an election season wasn't a good idea. So we're going to continue to move forward and have a thoughtful discussion about the revenue cap and perhaps some tweaks and changes to it that might make it better.
He's Mike Dunn. He is CEO of the Greater Salisbury Committee. They're promoting our city and trying to make it better all the time. And we will have him back here in 2 years to talk about the city election when the mayor and the council's up. Can you believe that? That will be the next presidential cycle.
Actually, it's in 2019. It's next year.
Oh, is it next year?
2020, correct.
See,
so I'll be back in a year.
But we'll have him on before that to talk about Greater Salisbury stuff, because you guys are always doing great stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you. I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.